Good day everyone, my name is Christian Lowe P. Dagasaan and I am taking up Master of Arts in Teaching General Sciences. My report is all about inquiry-based learning. To start with, let's all read in the slide. Tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. The last part of this statement is the essence of inquiry-based learning. Inquiry is defined as a seeking for truth, information, or knowledge. Seeking information by questioning, individuals carry on the process of inquiry from the time they are born until they die. This is true even though they might not reflect upon the process. Unfortunately, our traditional educational system has worked in a way that discourages the natural process of inquiry. Students become less prone to ask questions as they move through the grade levels. In traditional schools, students learn not to ask too many questions, instead, to listen and repeat the expected answers. Some of the discouragement of our natural inquiry process may come from a lack of understanding about the deeper nature of inquiry-based learning. There is even a tendency to view it as fluff learning. Effective inquiry is more than just asking questions. A complex process is involved when the individuals attempt to convert information and data into useful knowledge. Useful application of inquiry learning involves several factors: a context of questions, a framework of questions, a focus for questions, a different level of questions. Well-designed inquiry learning produces knowledge formation that can be widely applied. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. This statement succinctly summarizes the inquiry-based approach to learning. However, when it comes to the question of the who created inquiry-based learning, it is thought not to crack. The answer is both everyone and no one. The ability to think, question, and the reason is inherent to all humans. Every individual has the potential to ask questions based on their own observation. As a result, there is no one person that can claim to be the creator of this idea. Looking at inquiry-based learning history, however, there are many individuals who have helped with the advancement of this method. The inquiry-based approach to learning has existed for thousands of years. While its proponents are numerous, it's not fair to say it was created by any one individual. Instead, we're going to talk about the three of the most significant advocates of this inquiry-based learning below. First is Socrates, or Socrates. This classical Greek philosopher believed that a person would learn not by being told, but being asked. It was through the reasoning process that the individual asked would come to a conclusion for himself. We know this process today as the Socratic method. It includes a friendly conversation with a partner in which one would ask a question. The other would answer. The first would question the other's reply, and so on. Socrates felt this process of asking, answering, and asking again would eventually allow the participants to distill their knowledge to the point of greater understanding. Socrates stated that wisdom begins in wonder. A synonymous of wonder is curiosity. It's this spark of curiosity that will motivate a student to look harder, explore farther, and think more about the world around them. When embarking on a learning-based inquiry activity with your students, use phrases such as, I wonder what would happen if, do you ever wonder why, I wonder how. Using an inquiry to start the process will have your students begin wondering as well. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This 18th century philosopher and writer did not agree with the time's popular method of didactic education. A didactic approach to teaching refers to a manner of instruction in which information is presented directly from the teacher to the pupil, in which the teacher selects the topic of instruction, controls instructional stimuli, obligates a response from a child, evaluates which child responds, and provides reinforcement. He believed this approach would make a child balk from gaining knowledge because it was not the child's choice to do so. In his book Emily, or On Education, he asked why children found the art of reading and writing to be such a terror. He answered, because the child is compelled to acquire it against his will and to use it for purpose beyond his comprehension. Rousseau believed that rather than forcing a child to learn, they should be allowed to observe the process of nature. And so, he theorized that curiosity would be voluntarily awakened and they would desire to find an explanation for their observation themselves. He further instructed, put the problem before the child and let him solve them himself. Let him know nothing because you have told him, but because he has learned it for himself. Sometimes, as educators, it's difficult to step back and allow students to learn from themselves. However, doing so can be enrich a child's learning experience by encouraging them to make their own discoveries. The last one was John Dewey. Dewey was a well-known early 20th century American psychologist and a philosopher. However, it was his work with the educational reform that earns him a place on the list. Dewey claimed, give the pupil something to do, not something to learn. And the doing is of such a nature as to demand thinking, learning naturally results. He firmly believed that the way to inspire true thoughts was to help a student relate the material to their own life and establish a lasting connection. He argued that when the students were allowed to a hands-on, they would think more and therefore learn more. He further stated, were all the instructors to realize that the quality of mental process, not the production of correct answers, is the measure of educative growth, something hardly less than a revolutionary in teaching would be work. There are times when teachers need to step back and encourage a child's thought process as they work through a problem or observation. If they struggle to arrive to the correct conclusion, a simple question on your part can help them turn their thoughts into the right direction. Humans have used their reasoning abilities since the beginning to solve complex problems and design solutions. We may now do it in a more modern way, but as long as humanity continues, the process will remain the same. Before we go deeper on how to go into an inquiry-based learning, let us familiarize first the four levels of inquiry. Inquiry can be broken down into four levels based on the amount of information and guidance that teachers provide the students. These help the teachers facilitate by providing students with the appropriate knowledge and guidance required at the given level of inquiry. The first level of inquiry is the limited or confirmation inquiry, where students confirm a principle through an activity when the results are known in advance. Limited inquiry is the less guided inquiry. In a traditional classroom, students follow the direction of the teachers or direction of a book and make sure that their result matches to those given in the text. The next level is the structured inquiry. Like the limited inquiry, the teacher will give an instruction to the students. But the difference is, in structured inquiry, there is no predetermined answer. The conclusion will be based on the student's investigation results. The third is the guided inquiry. Unlike in the structured and limited inquiry, there is no predetermined method, or the teacher will not give direction to the students. The students must determine how to investigate the problem in order to build a conclusion. The last level of inquiry is the open inquiry, where the students investigate questions that are student formulated through student designed or selected procedures. Open inquiry is the most guided inquiry, where there is no predetermined question and the student proposed and pursued their own questions. Now, as we know already the four levels of inquiry, let us see which one belongs to teacher-centered and student-centered. As what you see in the slide, the limited inquiry and structured inquiry belongs to the teacher-centered, and the guided inquiry and open inquiry belongs to the student-centered. For the next slides, we will discuss how to get into inquiry-based learning, how it is done, and administered to our students effectively. The four phases of inquiry-based learning will guide the teacher to have an effective practice. According to the Indiana University Bloomington, inquiry-based learning is an instructional model that centers learning on solving a particular problem or answering a central question. There are several different inquiry-based learning models, but most have several general elements in common. Learning focuses around a meaningful, ill-structured problem that demands consideration of diverse perspectives. Academic content learning occurs as a natural part of the process as students work towards finding solution. Learners working collaboratively assume as an active role in a learning process. Teachers provide learners with a learning support and reach multiple media sources of information to assist students in successfully finding solutions. Learner shares and defends solution publicly in some manner. The first phase is the interacting. Dive into engaging, relevant, and credible media forms to identify a need or opportunity for inquiry. The first phase of inquiry is one characterized by interaction. This interaction can be: first, student to material, This material is ideally obtained through normal and informal means. It can be modeled or supplemented by teacher-provided materials. Next is the student-to-peer. This interaction is chosen by teacher or student informed by need for information and perspective. Third is the student-to-expert. Expert within relevant field at accessible levels. And the last one is student-to-media. These include digital text, pure data, videos, and others. The next page is clarifying. It is summarizing, paraphrasing, and categorizing learning with teachers or expert support. This happens by analyzing data, identifying and clarifying misconception, and otherwise getting a feel for the scale, nature, and possibility of selected topics of inquiry. After skimming, reading, watching, and otherwise interacting with a variety of media, this stage of the inquiry process is centered around the students clarifying both their own thinking and the nature of things around them. Ideas for projects, scientific challenges, opportunities for revision, need for design thinking, a new scale to tackle persistent problem, and others. Thinking patterns are both inward and reflective, and outward and communicated. In that way, students both reflect on their own knowledge while beginning to identify possible pathways forward. The third phase is the questioning. Asking questions to drive continued, self-directed inquiry. The questioning phase is a critical phase of the inquiry-based learning process. If for no other reason than misunderstanding, lack of organization, uneven confidence, or an inability to see the big picture surface here more clearly than other phases. Students and teachers alike must also be able to trust the nature of patterns of inquiry that are often recursive and iterative. They often move back and forth between phases, and a new skills and understanding can be obtained in frustratingly small increments. Inquiry-based learning is more about the process, tone, and instinct of learning than other tidier academic forms, which can require both students and teachers to adjust their measures of progress, quality, and success. The last phase is the designing. Designing is an accessible, relevant, and curiosity-driven action or product to culminate and justify inquiry. At this final stage of the inquiry-based learning process, learning are focused on design. Design of solution to address problems within a manageable scale, design of logical and curiosity-based application of current understanding, and design of the next step to extend their own learning pathways. To understand more, I compiled some video clips in order for us to know how to implement the inquiry-based learning in our classrooms. Let's watch the video and let's enjoy.
Teacher has never done inquiry-based learning before, or it is something that is only occasionally performed in the classroom. What steps can be taken to fully integrate inquiry into a class's normal routine? Let's see how Andrea does it. Andrea here is an elementary school teacher. This week, Andrea is going to teach her grade 2 class about simple machines.
We are going to talk about the simple machines. Now,
Andrea's background, however, is not in science, and she isn't an expert in simple machines. Before she can teach her class about simple machines, she herself has to become familiar with the topic. The best place for Andrea to start is by looking at the curriculum. This will help her learn exactly what the students need to learn, and perhaps more importantly, what is not part of the grade 2 curriculum. As a teacher, Andrea has limited time, and so doing this will help her filter out what is extraneous. Now that Andrea knows what her grade 2 class needs to learn about simple machines, where can she go to learn or brush up on the content? Textbooks are of course good for this, but in this day and age, some simple online searches can get you some good results fast. Trusted YouTube channels, museum websites, and yes, even Wikipedia can all be useful. Andrea has to be careful though. Some sites like Wikipedia can often bog down topics with very high-level content that might not be relevant to the situation at hand. Andrea shouldn't forget about work colleagues and PD Day contacts she's made as good sources of info.
I
Andrea.
Hi, Melanie. I was wondering if you had some materials I could use for my activity today.
For sure, I have lots of things for you.
Once Andrea feels like she's gotten a good grasp of the content to teach, she now has to find some sort of inquiry activity for her class. Again, lots of activities and things to build can be found online, as well as through colleagues. Soon, what Andrea finds online will spark her imagination and give her ideas of how to link the content to society and the environment, which is a big component of the curriculum. Whatever she ends up finding though, Andrea might have to make her own activity modifications to fit her class's specific needs. As Andrea is searching, there are a few things that she can keep in mind to help her find an activity that is appropriate. For one, in order to save time, it's a good idea for her to search for something that students can assemble rather than for Andrea to have to assemble everything herself. Also, because teachers typically don't have big budgets, one thing Andrea can do is to find activities that don't require many materials and that can be reused from supplies Andrea already has, are available at school, or through her school board or that she can buy at a dollar store. With Inquery, something Andrea will be doing is splitting her class into small work groups of no more than 6. Andrea will have to take that into consideration when getting her supplies. Also, Andrea should make sure to design an activity that she is comfortable doing in class. Safety should be a priority. Why Andrea decides to start her lessons by laying down a foundation of basic content.
What simple machines do is they move objects. They help us move objects. I'm gonna write that on the board.
In other words, Andrea is going to teach, teaching content being something that she's comfortable with and knows she's good at. Here, Andrea is teaching about simple machines with an emphasis on inclined planes. One thing Andrea keeps in mind is that the overall expectation in the science curriculum is to link the content to society and the environment.
One of these simple machines.
A wrap?
Excellent.
Andrea makes some of these links by showing off a variety of simple machines in our everyday lives, something that she learned about in her online searches.
Using a lever, you just didn't know it. A wheel and axle, that's right. So here's my axle, here's my wheel.
She's also teaching the students about how simple machines make our lives easier.
Heavy things like that.
Once Andrea has gone over some fundamental concepts, she and her class are now ready to move on to some basic structured inquiry. With structured inquiry, Andrea will provide her students with a question to answer or a problem to solve, and give her students a procedure to follow in order to arrive at a solution. She will not, however, provide the students with the solution. That's up to them to figure out.
This is what you're going to do. You're going to take one book, and you're going to put your inclined plane on the book, and inside you will find a styrofoam ball. You're going to take your styrofoam ball, you're going to put it at the top of your inclined plane, and you're going to let it roll down. And wherever it stops, you're going to let it stop. You're going to measure from the end of the inclined plane to the middle of the ball. And you're going to write it down. So for one book, you're going to roll the ball and write down how many centimeters it went. Do that 2 more times. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do it for how many books do you think now?
2.
2. So you're going to add another textbook and do it again 3 times. And then you're going to do it again. How many textbooks this time? 3. You guys are too smart. And make sure that someone in the group is recording all the measurements. So someone can help it roll, someone can measure it, and someone can be writing. That way everyone in the group has a role.
Here, not only do we see Andrea using structured inquiry to help the students become familiar with the materials, but structured inquiry also helps them go over the content that they have just learned. Notice how Andrea has separated the class into groups of 6. Typically, groups of 3 are ideal. It means everyone gets a chance to make use of the materials and perform some experimenting or problem solving. Now that the students have a good knowledge and experience foundation and have had a chance to become familiar with the materials, Andrea can start to push the limits of what her class can achieve.
Does everyone see that? So when you increase the steepness...
It's at this point that Andrea will challenge her students with a guided inquiry activity. With guided inquiry, Andrea will pose a question to her class and present them with a problem to solve. Using what they have learned up until this point, it will be up to the students to figure out a procedure to follow and ultimately arrive at the solution. Guided inquiry presents the perfect opportunity to spark students' imaginations by allowing Andrea to present creative scenarios for students to take part in. By looking at curriculum expectations, Andrea can come up with scenario ideas that link the content to society and the environment.
Is there any way I can move this and get Barry to the top of the bench? There is a simple machine that we could use to help Barry. What do you think?
A ramp.
A ramp. And what's the word again for ramps that we're going to be using? Excellent. But you have to build an inclined plane to get Barry to the top of the mountain. we have lots of inclined planes. So what could we do with all these inclined planes? And I have masking tape in here as well. What could we do?
We can just tape them up.
Absolutely. You have to get Barry to the top of the hill. You move Barry by moving the masking.
Guided inquiry can be incredibly rewarding for a class. Teachers will often hear their students cheer when they arrive at a working solution to a challenging problem. Guided inquiry also achieves a strong balance between student freedom and constraints. Students are instructed to solve a specific problem with specific tools, but are given the freedom to arrive at the solution using their own strategies. The end result is that students take ownership of their work and arrive at the lesson's desired conclusions without being overwhelmed by too many options and going too far off the beaten track. It takes practice to create a guided inquiry activity that really hooks students. If an activity is compelling enough, it's often at this stage that Andrea will encounter students who won't want to stop playing and building. Their motivation can be quite high.
You were able to get Barry to the top of the mountain. That's every single group. Everyone, big round of applause. Good job. You all got Barry to the top. Very good. So you have to get the medicine to him. Now here's the problem.
Here, Andrea is presenting a second activity that she has previously observed to be quite appealing to students.
You have to build a transport system to move the
It's also often during guided inquiry that students will start asking questions, trying to delve deeper into the content. These questions are the key to the next step in inquiry, open inquiry. Open inquiry is a byproduct of other forms of inquiry. With open inquiry, the teacher does not provide the solution, the method, nor the question. The students come up with the questions. Because Andrea has scaffolded the inquiry, students should feel comfortable enough now with the materials to answer many of the inquiry questions that they or their colleagues might have. Doing so would involve making predictions and planning their own procedure with some teacher assistance. Here, Andrea encourages the students to come up with questions about inclined planes that can be answered through experimentation. She and the class are going to figure out which questions can be tested using the available materials. Ultimately, because the questions come from the students' curiosity, there is a high intrinsic motivation to arrive at a conclusion. Open inquiry leads to powerful teachable moments and is incredibly satisfying for students and teachers who both use the opportunity to learn something new. It requires flexibility and patience from the teacher. It's easy to see the questions that students ask as distractions that have to be put aside in order to have time to cover all of the content.
How does the pulley work?
I'm sorry, we just don't have time to go over that.
But
No, just stop.
Embracing these questions, however, can lead to powerful teachable moments. Students coming up with questions on their own is a wonderful thing, as that means that the student's motivation to learn more about that particular topic is high.
Miss T, how does a pulley work?
Basically, a pulley works by helping us lift a
Here, Andrea chooses not to put aside the student's question. She's being flexible by taking time to focus on this moment. But because time as an elementary school teacher is limited, this might mean that Andrea will have to find time later in the week to go over the student's question. Or she might have to extend her current lesson and push back a following lesson to another time. Another instant where teacher flexibility comes into play occurs when a student goes about solving a problem using an unexpected methodology. It can be tempting for teachers in these instances to steer the students towards the correct methodology or solution in order to save time or stay in line with the lesson plan.
No, that's not how it's done. Let me show you how to do it.
Here we can see how Andrea responds to a student going off the beaten track. These deviations brought on by the student, however, are not wrong and can lead to some very interesting moments. Andrea chooses to embrace the deviation. The role of the teacher during inquiry-based activities is that of the facilitator. Andrea here wants to open as many doors as possible for her students. She wants to encourage their thinking and promote dialogue so that they can understand and justify their decisions when playing. Andrea tries to stay away from closed questions. They tend to put an end to dialogue really fast.
I see that you've used inclined planes that are not very steep. Did that work for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Instead, Andrea pushes her students by making use of open-ended questions. Asking students to explain why they think something didn't work, or to let them speculate what would happen if a variable changed, is a great way to develop her students' critical thinking skills.
What do you think the purpose was? Go ahead.
So that goes straight down, so then they can make a barrier. So then they can...
To help her with this, she could always use the smarter science predict, explain, observe, explain methodology. When students engage in inquiry-based learning, there is inevitably going to be some trial and error. Making mistakes and having solutions not work are good things. Like in real life, It often takes many failures to get to a successful solution. Failing should not be discouraged. It's a great way to learn.
If your design doesn't work the first time, is it the end of the world?
No.
Well, actually, if you fail now, you're probably gonna fail for the rest of your life. Frankly, failure is not an option.
Failing can, however, be discouraging to students and prevent them from wanting to continue trying. Andrea wants to cultivate the idea that failing is not a bad thing. Andrea's strategy to go about this is to set up proper expectations before starting any activity. Andrea wants the students to get used to the idea that if something doesn't work, it's good practice to stop, observe what didn't work, and then take the time to think of a solution.
I can't get him up.
Okay. Is that the end of the world, class?
No.
I think this is a good time to stop.
Students can have trouble with this concept at first, but by nature, they have an intrinsic resilience to failure.
What do you think?
I think you should put the support a little higher.
Andrea also wants to let her students know that it's also okay for them to let go of an idea if they get stuck in a rut.
Liam, what do you think?
I think I'll try it.
Let's go ahead and try it.
Not all ideas work out in the end, and just because they've invested time into an idea doesn't mean that that idea has to be seen to completion. It's inevitable that during inquiry-based learning activities, students will ask questions that teachers don't know the answer to. It can be scary and frustrating for teachers to go into an activity knowing that students will test the limits of their knowledge. Teachers don't have to know all of the answers.
A simple machine is a mechanical device that changes the direction or magnitude of a force. They use mechanical...
Many teachers are not engineers or biologists. That's fine. Not knowing all of the answers makes teachers look human and more relatable.
Let's get back to mechanical advantage for a moment. What this is a measure of the force amplification achieved by using something like a simple machine. It all has to do with the law of the lever, a lever being a movable bar that pivots on a fulcrum attached or positioned on or across a fixed point.
But instead of answering a question with, "I don't know," it is possible instead to use "I don't know" as a starting point for deeper inquiry. Even without expertise, teachers can still offer lots of useful information about the process of asking good questions and finding answers efficiently. Here, Andrea is being asked a question that she doesn't know the answer to.
Can we use this book for support?
I don't know. I guess so. Let's try it out.
She does recognize, however, that because her class has been doing related inquiry activities, her and her student have the tools available to answer the question.
Great job. It worked.
We see a very powerful teachable moment where the student's questions has led to an entirely new spontaneous activity. Because it's the student's own question, the student is motivated to take ownership of the experiment and to figure out the answer. Andrea's role is to be the guide in the answer-finding process. She supports the students and gently nudges them in the directions that have a good chance of finding the answer. Here's another example where the student asks Andrea a question that she can't answer.
Do Egyptians use inclined plates to make a pyramid?
This question, however, is more knowledge-based and doesn't lend itself well to testing in
Let's do
class.
some research and find out.
Andrea can still create a teachable moment out of this by using this as an opportunity to have the student practice researching skills. Success in activity design is about sparking curiosity and allowing the students to feel good. Whatever the activity is, it needs to have a hook. A hook can be something like a story that has tension and the need for resolution. It can also be an element of surprise where a prop behaves in an unexpected way. These are elements that lead the students to want to know more. These are things that make it so that the students want to find out the answer.
Now let us see the advantages and the disadvantages of inquiry-based learning in our classroom. The blue color represents the advantages and the red color represents the disadvantages. Inquiry-based learning has been used at every level from elementary to university with varying levels of success. But it's easy to see what the advantages are. First is the greater interest. Let's begin with perhaps the biggest pro. When students are allowed to ask questions and guide the direction of the curriculum, they are going to express more significant interest in the subject matter. This gets them more excited about being there and makes it more likely they'll pay attention. Next, it teaches problem solving. At the heart of inquiry-based learning is an inquisition, and not only are students encouraged to ask questions, but they're told to find the answers. Considering that problem-solving skills are valuable in every industry and specialty, this style of learning prepares students for the real world like few others. It also enhances teamwork skills. With these teaching styles, students are taught to engage with one another, work in group, and tackle problems together. This leads to greater teamwork skills, something that proves useful in the most areas of life. And lastly, long-term knowledge retention. Research shows that elaboration at the time of learning, such as fact sharing and conversation, enhances the retrieval of information at a later date. This indicates that inquiry-based learning leads to greater long-term knowledge retention. In certain classrooms, inquiry-based learning works exceptionally well. This tends to be classrooms where students have reached a certain level of maturity and have the ability to work both independently and jointly. Now let's go to the disadvantages of inquiry-based learning. In theory, inquiry-based learning is a perfect system that maximizes engagement and gives students a chance to extract meaning and purpose from their education. However, the problem with theoretical learning strategies is they don't always stand the test of the real-world applications. Here are some of the disadvantages associated with this learning style. First, poorer standardized testing performances. When too much time is dedicated to the student inquiries, there's always the risk that important core topics could be left out. Naturally, this hurts standardized testing performance. And in a world where standardized exam plays a key role in school accreditation and funding, this can become a real-world problem. Next is student embarrassment. In inquiry-based learning, students are required to speak up and participate. For the most part, this is a good thing. However, there's also the risk of embarrassing students who may not be quick thinker. The last one is teacher unpreparedness. For certain teachers, inquiry-based learning is too haphazard. It prevents them from being able to prepare properly, which hurt their ability to engage students on a meaningful level. And anytime a teacher is unprepared, the classroom suffers as a result. Clearly, inquiry-based learning isn't a perfect solution. As is the case with any teaching learning style, there are challenges that must be worked through. The question is, do the pros outweigh the cons? Greater engagement should always be the goal in the classroom. Some students are naturally smarter than others. Some students will perform better in exam than others. Lumping everyone into one category is impossible. Engagement, however, supersedes all these facts and is something that we should seek to capitalize in each individual case. Though there is no perfect solution, inquiry-based learning does seem to maximize engagement in ways that traditional styles of learnings do not. This makes it worthy of consideration in classrooms at all levels of the educational system.